Starling's One podcast, our first episode. I'm Patrick. We have a very life and death article to talk about today. It's called The Death and Life of Prediction Markets at Google. This was an article written by Dan Schartz, who actually worked at Waymo, by my understanding. And he goes through and reviews the history of prediction markets, both at early Google in the early 2000s as well as at Waymo. And I think that was in the late 2010s or 2020 timeframe. It's a very fascinating article. We have this article summarized by an AI. Basically, we'll read off to you in a very interesting fashion. I don't want to endorse everything that the AI hosts talk about, but I will say it's quite interesting and a pretty easy way to just kind of get through an article. If you want to go through the article itself, we'll have it in the link in the description. But basically, some of the takeaways from my perspective are basically how difficult it is to get executive buy-in at a big company for using a prediction market for decision making. One of the memorable points to me was you couldn't really use a prediction market if it was going to harm somebody's reputation, if it was something about something internal, but it sounded like there was maybe some potential if you're talking about monitoring external events outside of the organization. Another interesting takeaway, this was towards the conclusion of the article, was that if the information you are generating is more expensive to generate than the value you are getting out of that information, that's also not going to fly. So I'll just let you go ahead here and listen to the AI-generated podcast. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy. Oh, hey, and I almost forgot. Jump on over to starlings.one for more information. Check out all of our different socials. And you can also check out our completely open source and MIT licensed prediction market called Social Predict. If you just search Social Predict on GitHub or just Google or whatever way you want to find it online. You know how to find things. Just search Social Predict, prediction market. All right, great. Thanks. Enjoy the episode.
Let's dive into the strategic side of things with prediction markets. Focusing on Google specifically as a case study, you brought in this interesting article from Asterisk Magazine, chronicles Google's experience with two internal prediction market platforms, Prophit and Gleangen. What we're trying to do today is, pull out the key insights for business leaders who are looking at prediction markets, as a tool for making decisions.
It's a really fascinating case study. A lot of valuable lessons there, I think, for any organization thinking about forecasting and strategic planning. The interesting thing here is how Google's experience reflects the broader challenges and opportunities associated with this idea of, operationalizing collective intelligence in a company.
Yeah, the article starts off by highlighting some early experiments with prediction markets. Robin Hansen's 1990 prediction market at Project Xanadu. Platforms like the Iowa Electronic Markets and the Hollywood Stock Exchange. What's the significance of these early examples in the broader context of how these markets evolved?
Yeah.
These early efforts, even with their limitations, provided really crucial evidence that if you aggregate diverse opinions through this kind of market mechanism, you can get forecasts that are surprisingly accurate. And this whole idea of harnessing collective intelligence, this was a challenge to traditional forecasting models that often relied on limited expert opinions or just looking at historical data.
And that leads us to Google's first foray into prediction markets with the launch of Prophit in 2005. The article really emphasizes that this wasn't just a casual experiment, but a structured initiative with input from Google's chief economist, Hal Varian. And the design was actually inspired by the Iowa Electronic Markets.
Exactly. And Prophit's structure, it incentivized accurate predictions through this, virtual currency system. And it quickly gained traction within Google. I think the platform engaged something like 20% of Google employees over 3 years and generated really valuable insights across various business areas.
They actually talk about an anecdote about a senior executive being taken aback by the lack of brown nosing. In a profit market related to, I think, a pretty critical hiring goal, it really suggests that the platform provided a level of unfiltered honesty that maybe challenged some existing power dynamics and assumptions.
Yeah, absolutely. And this anecdote really highlights the potential of these markets to uncover unbiased insights that might otherwise be obscured by hierarchies or political maneuvering. In this case, Prophit's forecast, actually, it prompted action and ultimately helped Google achieve their hiring objective.
It's interesting, though, that while Prophet demonstrated, overall accuracy, there was a noticeable optimism bias in the predictions that were related to Google itself.
Yeah, that's a key observation. This bias underscores how important it is to recognize the inherent biases that are going to exist within these markets,
Boy,
particularly when participants have a vested interest in the outcome. So decision makers have to be aware of these tendencies and kind of interpret the forecasts with those in mind.
given Prophet's success within Google, it seems, logical that the next step would be to launch it publicly. But the article details how regulatory hurdles related to online gambling in the United States kind of derailed that ambition.
This is such a crucial aspect of the Prophet narrative because it really demonstrates the external challenges that can impact even the most promising internal innovations. You have the legal ambiguity surrounding these markets at the time. Coupled with the political climate following the 2008 financial crisis, it created a really significant roadblock.
The article talks about how Google, along with other tech companies like Yahoo and Microsoft, actively lobbied the CFTC, Commodity Futures Trading Commission, for an exemption. They even secured support from prominent economists, published influential articles advocating for the benefits of prediction markets.
Yeah, there really did seem to be momentum building towards a regulatory solution, but the timing was just unfortunate. The 2008 financial crisis and the subsequent Dodd-Frank Act, it created this environment that was very much against any kind of financial deregulation, which basically hindered Prophet's prospects for a public launch.
So, despite a lot of effort
Yeah.
and initial promise, Prophet's path to a broader market was blocked. And the article details a somewhat surprising pivot, an attempt to integrate the platform into a social network for Chinese users.
Yeah. This strategic shift, ended up being kind of a long shot. And as key members of the Prophet team kind of moved on to other things, the internal support dwindled. And that led to the platform being shut down in 2011.
And Bo Cowgill, one of the original creators of Prophet, he later expressed some regret for not capitalizing on the platform's internal value, which suggests that even without the public launch success, Prophet had still shown that it could be a valuable tool within Google.
Right. And that kind of sets the stage for Google's second attempt at internal prediction markets, a shift away from these external ambitions, and a renewed focus on internal utility. And that's where Dan Schartz comes in, the author of the article, setting the stage for Gleangen.
So the article kind of suggests that Schwartz's interest in prediction markets goes back to his college days. He was really fascinated by, their ability to tap into this collective wisdom. And then when he joined Google in 2014, he actually sought out the creators of Prophet, wanted to learn from their experience.
His persistence is really noteworthy. I mean, he saw the potential of these markets, even when, after Prophet's closure, the prevailing sentiment was probably pretty skeptical.
He wasn't put off by the regulatory challenge.
No, not at all. Actually, it was Bo Cowgill's regret about not fully using Prophet's internal capabilities that really caught his attention. And it kind of sparked this idea for Schartz, like, could he create a prediction market that's specifically designed for Google's internal decision-making?
So it was like a refined version of Prophet, but just for internal use.
Exactly. But his initial attempts to revive the concept, they met with some pushback. Colleagues, former Prophet team members, they weren't convinced. So he needed a more compelling case, a real-world problem that a prediction market could solve. And that opportunity came when Schartz joined Waymo, Google's self-driving car company, in 2018.
What was the specific challenge he identified at Waymo?
So he recognized this critical issue within Waymo's systems engineering team. Basically, you had this fragmented data and differing opinions about how various projects would impact these critical safety metrics. And this lack of consensus was really hindering effective decision-making.
Classic, information silos impeding progress.
Right. And Schartz saw an opportunity to use a prediction market to aggregate the collective knowledge of all these Waymo engineers. He wanted a platform that could provide, a clearer picture of which projects were actually most likely to enhance safety, more data-driven.
His idea was inspired by Waymo's founders' challenges. These were really ambitious goals set by Larry Page, and he believed a prediction market could have actually given them early warnings about potential roadblocks, which would then increase the likelihood of success.
Right. A way to use that collective wisdom for course correction or to mitigate risks. He developed a prototype for a Waymo-specific prediction market, but he ran into a pretty significant cultural barrier, a reluctance to openly share data.
That seems a little counterintuitive for a data-driven organization like Google.
It might seem that way, but Schwartz's experience kind of reveals this challenge that a lot of organizations face, the free flow of information, which is essential for these markets to work well. It often clashes with the desire for control and compartmentalization that you see in a lot of companies.
So even though he demonstrated that this could be a valuable tool within Waymo, he still faced this resistance.
Yeah, he wasn't able to fully implement his concept because of this cultural barrier. But undeterred, he went back to Google in 2019, and he joined the supply chain forecasting team. And it was during this time, amidst, all the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic, that Gleangen was born.
The article says that Gleangen was launched during Schwartz's personal time, right in the middle of the pandemic lockdowns.
No.
What was the thinking behind focusing on, pandemic-related predictions?
I think the pandemic was a unique opportunity. You had this period of unprecedented uncertainty, and people were really craving information and insights. So Schwartz was able to to relaunch this prediction market concept as Gleangen, a platform that was open to all Google employees.
Mm-hmm.
And those initial predictions about the pandemic, it served as a really compelling test case.
For a real-time experiment with, implications that everyone could relate to.
Exactly. And Gleangen had some early success forecasting, things like office reopenings, vaccine availability. So it was showing that it could provide these valuable insights during times of uncertainty. But Schwartz had a more ambitious goal in mind. He wanted to make Gleangen a part of Google's decision-making process across the board.
It was more than just a pandemic forecasting tool.
Yeah. He saw it as something that could be used to make better decisions in lots of different areas. So he ran these pilot programs across various divisions, showcasing Gleangen's ability to predict, everything from product demand for Nest thermostats to advancements in quantum computing. He was very strategic, identifying specific use cases and then tailoring Gleangen to address those.
It sounds like you learned from the Prophit experience, the importance of demonstrating the practical applications and aligning the platform with these specific business needs.
Right. But despite this more targeted approach, the article highlights some pretty significant obstacles that he encountered. That data reluctance, it was still a big challenge. A lot of managers weren't willing or maybe just weren't able to share the data that you would need to generate these really accurate predictions. It points to this fundamental tension between, the need for open information flow for prediction markets to work, and then this control-oriented culture that you see in a lot of companies.
It's almost like a distrust in the wisdom of the crowd.
Yeah. You also had this issue of plausible deniability. A lot of managers, to avoid being held accountable for inaccurate forecasts.
Mm-hmm.
But prediction markets, by their nature, they challenge that because they introduce this level of transparency that can be uncomfortable.
You can expose flaws in judgment.
Yeah.
And that can be threatening to those who are, in a position of authority.
Exactly. And then there's this always present concern of market manipulation, the possibility that someone might try to influence the outcomes for their own personal gain. So there are some valid concerns there about the integrity of the data. And then finally, you have just this inherent human resistance to change, which Schwartz refers to as status quo bias. Introducing any new decision-making tool, no matter how promising it is always going to face some inertia, some skepticism.
So even though he was actively trying to address the needs of these different teams within Google, he was still up against some pretty deeply ingrained organizational and human tendencies.
Yeah, and one of the most illustrative examples of this is his attempt to use Gleangen to improve Google's data center supply chain forecasting, which seems like it would be, a perfect application for a prediction market. Accurate forecasting, it's essential to making sure Google has the resources to, support all this vast infrastructure.
Right. If they overestimate demand, it leads to wasted resources. If they underestimate, it could lead to, service disruptions, financial losses.
Exactly. But even in this, seemingly perfect scenario, he faced some unexpected complexities. While some managers acknowledged that Gleangen could probably improve forecasting accuracy, their priorities weren't always aligned with that goal.
So what were some of their concerns?
Well, their focus went beyond just accuracy. They were prioritizing, things like transparency, adjustability, accountability, seamless integration with existing systems. Bringing Gleangen into the mix, it threatened to disrupt, all these established workflows, and it could potentially undermine managerial objectives. That went beyond simply, just improving the forecast.
So it sounds like the potential benefits of increased accuracy were outweighed by the perceived disruption to the existing processes and power structures.
That's a really key insight. And it kind of highlights a fundamental challenge for prediction markets in general, bridging this gap between the theoretical potential of these platforms and the practical realities of how organizations work. Schwartz had the data, he had the technology, but aligning that with the complexities of human behavior and organizational priorities, that turned out to be the hardest part.
And that brings us to what could be considered Gleangen's biggest missed opportunity, forecasting the rise of large language models, LLMs, and what that meant for, Google's core business.
So as the world was becoming more aware of just how transformative these LLMs could be, Schwartz saw Gleangen as a way to not just to predict, the technical advancements, but also to anticipate how those advancements would change the dynamics of the tech industry. Who are the winners and losers going to be?
He understood that LLMs were like a paradigm shift. Yeah. Being able to accurately forecast where things were going was going to be crucial for any organization operating in that space, especially for a company like Google. Their whole business is built on information.
Right. Retrieval, processing, all of that.
The article talks about how Schwartz worked with these teams within Google Research who were developing their own LLM, which we know is LaMDA. He wanted to use Gleangen to forecast not only the technical milestones in LLM development, but also the timelines for getting those technologies into actual products and services.
They even launched this LLM forecasting contest to get people more engaged and get more data, which shows that there was a real intention there to use Gleangen in this very important area.
And then we get to late 2022. When OpenAI releases ChatGPT, a chatbot that was powered by, a much more advanced LLM. And this event really sent shockwaves through the tech industry, especially at Google, where the competitive landscape changed dramatically, almost overnight, it felt like.
It's really interesting how this development exposed a blind spot for Gleangen. So the platform had successfully predicted a lot of these internal developments related to Google's own LLM LaMDA, but it failed to see how quickly things were progressing with their competitors, especially Microsoft, who very quickly integrated OpenAI's technology into their products.
So while Gleangen was focused on predicting what was happening inside Google, the real disruption was coming from outside.
Exactly. And this is a really important lesson for any company that's using prediction markets. You have to make sure that what the platform is focused on aligns with what the decision makers need to know. In this case, Google's leadership would have been much better served if they had forecasts about what the competition was doing, not just, internal developments.
Schwartz, looking back, he acknowledges this missed opportunity. He sees that Gleangen could have played a much more strategic role in helping Google anticipate and respond to that threat, the threat from OpenAI and Microsoft. So what ultimately happened to Gleangen? Did missing this opportunity lead to its downfall?
No, not really. The story has kind of a bittersweet ending. So shortly after that LLM forecasting contest, Gleangen was officially integrated into Google's behavioral economics team, which kind of suggests that even though, they missed this opportunity, they still saw some value in the platform. However, Schwartz himself left Google in late 2022 to join Metaculus, a public prediction platform.
But Gleangen is still operating within Google.
As of when the article was written, which was late 2024, the team at Google was still refining Gleangen's approach, trying to make it a more valuable tool for the leadership team. The article talks about two key areas that they're focusing on. First, a much greater emphasis on making sure the information is actually relevant to the decisions that the leaders are facing, which means you need that close collaboration between the prediction market team and the people who are, responsible for strategy.
So it's not just about generating forecasts. It's about tailoring those forecasts to the the specific needs of the decision makers, actionable intelligence,
Yeah.
not just data.
Right. And the second area is leveraging AI to make it, easier and less costly to generate those forecasts. So that means using AI to automate tasks like identifying, where to get the right data from, and even coming up with the questions for the predictions. As AI continues to evolve, it's going to play a bigger and bigger role, not only empowering prediction markets, but also in being evaluated by them.
A fascinating feedback loop. The article even mentions a study that was done recently that compared human forecasters on Gleangen to predictions that were generated by Google's Palm 2 large language model. The AI model actually did pretty well, but in the end, the human forecasters still outperformed it.
That result is really interesting, though, because it raises a question for the future. As AI gets better and better at forecasting, what role will human judgment play? Will it be this kind of collaborative thing where AI is augmenting human intuition? Or will AI eventually just completely replace human forecasters?
Definitely something to think about as we enter this age where AI is becoming more and more capable. So as we wrap things up, what are the main takeaways for our listeners? A lot of them are, in leadership positions, looking for ways to use data to make better decisions.
The story of Prophit and Gleangen shows us what's possible and also where the pitfalls are when you try to use collective intelligence within organizations. It shows how important it is to understand both the technical side and the organizational side of prediction markets.
It's a good reminder that even the most cutting-edge technologies are only as good as the people who are using them. If you want them to be effective, you have to integrate them thoughtfully into the way you already work. And they have to be aligned with the overall goals of the organization. It's not just about the technology. It's about creating a culture that embraces data-driven insights and is willing to adapt based on what that data tells you.
And maybe even more importantly, it shows us that there's this ongoing tension between, wanting to make decisions based on data and all of those human factors that influence how we perceive information, how we interpret it, how we act on it. Within these really complex organizations, even in the age of AI, human judgment is still essential, especially when you're navigating an uncertain future. And that's maybe the most important lesson we can learn from Google's experience with prediction markets.